Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Coffee with the Critters, where we live stream every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, unless otherwise noted. So Coffee with the Critters is getting ready to turn 5 years old next month. For those of you that are not familiar with the work we do, my name is Lara Joseph. I'm owner of the Animal Behavior Center. We're an international educational center where we teach people all over the world how to understand applied behavior analysis and positive reinforcement with the animals in our care. We do that through our live streaming services, and our focus and our mission is empowering people and the people, empowering animals and the people that care for them. So thank you for joining us this morning. We have another great episode. Thank you to Jim Gillis, who has been on here with us before from the UK. He's helped put this together. Before we get started, we have a couple of guests joining us, but let me talk about a few things that have happened in the past week, and for those of you that may be new to the work we do. So on our Facebook page, you can find out all our future events. To the left of the screen, all upcoming events, workshops, what have you. You can also sign up for our email newsletter list through there. And you can, where we try to send out an email newsletter every 2 weeks, but I'll tell you, I'm not very good at that. You can also find out about the work we do on our website, which is theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. And in mentioning that, the Animal Behavior Center Friday turned 7 years old. So 7 years ago, the Animal Behavior Center didn't even exist. And the reason I put the Animal Behavior Center, our mission is, like I said, empowering people, animals, and the people that care for them. Is I adopted in an animal that was going to be put to sleep for behavior issues and behaviors labeled as aggressive. I put myself back through school, taking master level classes in applied behavior analysis to do better for this particular animal. And he is currently the mascot of our center, which you see right there on our homepage. So the work that we do here is international. We have membership programs, level 1 for companion animals, for people who want to know how to do better using applied behavior analysis and positive reinforcement, and we make it very easy to understand. We also have our projects, which are species specific, for people who want to learn more about working particularly with deaf dogs, parrots, pigs, and more. Our level 2 is more for professionals that want to get in the field of applied animal behavior. Last night we had in the amazing Samantha Sarin. She has her master's in applied behavior analysis and also a board certified behavior analyst. We talked about digging deeper into no reward markers. So if you want to find out anything more about the work that we do, you can go to our website at theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. You can also reach me personally via email at Lara, L-A-R-A, at theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. So without further ado, we have 2 guests coming on today. The amazing Jim Gillis from the UK, professional dog trainer, also focusing on behavior. We're getting ready to bring him on. He helped put this episode together today. We also have the amazing Michael Shikashio. Mike, am I saying your last name correctly? Great. Okay, thank you. I've heard about Mike, I've read about Mike, and today I'm having my first live stream conversation with him. So today we are going to talk about the Muzzle Up Project. So I could try to explain it to you, but instead let me bring on the professionals and they can give you more information about that. Good morning, Jim and Mike. Thanks for joining us here.
Good morning.
Coffee with
Morning. Morning.
So I'll give just a brief, read a brief bio on both of you. So, and you could probably better give more information on what you do and how you do it. So Michael is a certified dog behavior consultant, is the past president of the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants, IAABC, and provides private consultations working exclusively with dog aggression cases through his business, aggressivedog.com. Michael is fully certified through the IAABC and is a full member of the Association of Professional Dog Trainers, APDT. I do want to read this because it's impressive. He's sought after for his expert opinion by numerous media outlets, including the New York Times, New York Post, Baltimore Sun, WebMD, and many other magazines. Did I get that correct, Mike?
You did. Thank you.
Great. You're very welcome. Jim Gillis, a certified dog behavior consultant for the past 7 years. Jim has worked with clients and their dogs on a wide range of behavior problems. In 2018, Jim joined a leading animal welfare charity as behavior officer, working in his post-adoption support in the rescue sector. Jim uses scientific, evidence-based approaches to training and behavior modifications. These include the use of the most up-to-date methods, which utilize force-free methods focusing exclusively on humane and non-aversive techniques. Did I get that accurate, Jim?
You did. Good job.
3 cups of coffee in this morning. Okay. So, Jim and Mike, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the Muzzle Up Project? I know, Jim, you've talked about it before. I've heard you mention it before in the past. Do you want to tell us how it started, and why it's important for people to know about this?
Sure. I'll maybe let Mike go into more of the background. He's maybe more familiar with the history of the Muzzle Up Project, but it was something that was very close to my heart, something that we would recommend to the dog owners as a really valuable resource across the board for muzzle training. Really useful and practical videos, content, just a great site all in all. But Mike will know more about the kind of history and give you more detail of that, if that's okay, Mike.
Sure, yeah. It was originally founded by Maureen Backman, who saw the need for educating the public about muzzles and advocating for the use of muzzles. And she approached me last year to take the project over. And of course, I said, absolutely, jumped at the chance to be able to continue the message. So I brought in a wonderful team of positive reinforcement-based trainers, including Jim, Kayla Fratt and Day Groden, Sarah McManaman, and the wonderful Deb Jones are all part of the team. So they've helped me, and I got to give them all much of the credit because they've been doing so much work in promoting it and just maintaining the Instagram channel and the website and the Facebook page. So. And then we're just continuing the message. And if anybody's interested, if people are on Instagram too, they can look up the hashtag Muzzle Up Project, which interestingly enough, it was, Maureen had started an Instagram page, and Kayla and I were like looking at, Sarah and I were looking at it because they're like big Instagram people. And I saw that there's like, 30 followers or something like that. But this hashtag Muzzle Up Project had taken up this huge following. There's over 5,000 posts on that hashtag. So I said, wow, that's amazing. So we started to really build the awareness there. But again, it's all about advocating for why muzzles don't have to be a bad thing for dogs and all the myths, really.
Yeah, and I was reading on the Muzzle Up Project's website right before I had both of you on, and I saw that Deb Jones was a part of it. People here on Coffee with the Critters are very familiar with Deb Jones. Because muzzles have, or did have, probably still do, a stigma attached to them, and it doesn't always mean what people think. I thought when I was reading that on the website, because it said dogs may wear muzzles because they eat stones or toxic substances, so it helps keep your animals safe.
Absolutely.
And it also, like, I know a lot of times when I was reading on there, a lot of times people will put dogs on their harness that says, do not approach. It'll say deaf dog on there. People don't always pay attention to that. And I think I liked what I was reading on the website. When you see a muzzle on a dog, that can be a clear communicator. Give this dog space.
Yeah.
So anything in addition you want to say about the Muzzle Up Project? What's the mission?
Maybe I'll let Jim take on some of that, because I know he also, it's interesting, the culture of muzzles too in different countries. People perceive them differently. Some places they're very normal to see, and some places they're unheard of. So maybe Jim can speak about that from where he's from.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree that they are likely stigmatized. So you see a dog with a muzzle and you form a kind of judgment of that dog, which is, probably unfair in the dog, because as you identify, there's lots of reasons why a dog will wear a muzzle. It's not always about aggression. But I kind of view it as a life skill for dogs, to have this in place. And there's probably no inappropriate way for going through muzzle training with a dog. It has so many practical applications, from vet checks to preventing some unwanted behaviour, to obviously aggression, where, as with any aggressive behaviour, safety and management is your first protocol with any of those types of behaviours. So it has a wide range of applications, but it should be viewed maybe as a life skill that we should be working with all dogs to incorporate muzzle training into their early development. And the Muzzle Up Project, I think, is just a fantastic resource for that. Totally free and educational, something that's widely accessible, and just a fantastic resource generally.
Yeah, and it kind of, to segue on that too, as Lara was mentioning, how muzzles can keep people away from a muzzled dog. People will avoid that, but it really helps, I find, in my cases, when the dog has a muzzle on, and you always have the people that say, "Don't worry, I'm great with dogs," and they stick their hand on. It helps to you're really advocating for the dog. So that's how I kind of sell it to clients that have a little hesitancy and saying, "Oh, muzzles, I don't know about that. They look like Hannibal Lecter." And so I'll sell it. Say, well, you're gonna help your dog, because especially if it's a fear-based case, it's going to keep people away from petting the dog, and it's going to really help that dog, when it's out in public. So there's many benefits to it.
Yeah, and with you saying that, Mike, it reminds me of when I got one of my most recent dogs. She's going to be 7 years old. So that's how long ago she came to me, Quincy, our Rottweiler, and I was trying to expose her to different environments for the well-being of her future. And I remember I took her to a public event to slowly introduce her to people. And it was the first time I had a dog in 8 years. Wow. And when I took her out into the public, everybody wanted to come at her and touch her, and they were reaching for her face, reaching over her head. And I knew prior to that she showed signs of not being comfortable with hands coming near her face. So I was prepared. I had her on a harness. I thought I was doing the best. I was doing the best with what I knew at the time. I had her on her harness, and I would ask people, please don't approach my dog. What I found out was that doesn't work very well alone. And like you said, people would say, oh, don't worry about it. Dogs love me. I'm great with dogs. And I'm watching my dog's behavior. So I quickly started learning within those couple of minutes different things I needed to say to keep these people away from my dog, and let me introduce my dog to you. It kept happening. So I was using the best that I had at the time, and I saw the next couple coming to me trying to approach my dog, and the hands came out, and I just said, sometimes less is better. I just said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And that she wasn't going to hurt them, but I'm the one that's going to have to walk away and work with these behaviors. And counter condition what somebody unknowingly trained. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if I were to walk in with a muzzle, I could probably, and I will now, use that as an educational tool to what you're seeing and why you're seeing, and let me share the education.
Yeah, yeah. I was, that's the thing that I always try also sell clients on is I'll take out a muzzle, right? And I'll say, this is about $15. It's a lot cheaper than some of the six-figure lawsuits that I am privy to, either in expert witness work or in the cases that I see. Some people can't even get homeowners insurance. So it's a very quick selling point, especially if you have somebody that's controlling the finances in the family. This is a lot cheaper than losing your homeowners. So another way of, again, just you can easily sell clients that get stuck on, I don't want to do that, or, there's a lot of stigmas about them.
There is, and something that comes to mind that could be similar is the same thing as the stigma as crating your dog. I know when we have people here in the center, our dogs usually go into the crates, and I'll ask people, do not approach the crates. And some of the things that one of the first things I hear is, "Oh, why do you have the dogs in the crate?" I'm like, "The dogs are comfortable in their crates."
Yeah.
So like the muzzle and the crate both tend to have this stigma, where I think it's due to either lack of knowing better currently or the way these items were used in the past.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And do either one of you want to?
Maybe, Jim could probably talk about some of the stigmas that he runs into with clients. I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Yeah, you actually made a comparison earlier with some of the kind of high-vis harnesses or kind of do not approach type, the kind of slips you put around the leads to stop people approaching a dog. And what you tend to find with that is it's more of an attraction than anything else. So somebody's more likely to come over when they see that type of thing out of curiosity or because they believe that they have some kind of intrinsic ability with dogs. And a muzzle can provide that deterrent, but it can also give confidence to both the owner and the dog when they know that nothing bad can happen, and that can include going out for walks, going for vet checks in particular. I think a muzzle is just a fantastic tool that shouldn't be viewed as an emergency measure. It should be used as as I said earlier, kind of life skill, something your dog has in play that you can use as and when necessary, if you like. But yeah, over here there definitely is a stigma as well, and I think the visual side of the basket muzzles, I think you showed one earlier, Mike, the Baskervilles, they just look menacing, particularly, maybe not so much in a smaller dog, but if you're working with, one of the bigger breeds, a German Shepherd, Rottweiler, and you see one of them with a muzzle on, then it can be quite intimidating from a aesthetic perspective, but it's the functionality which is important, right?
So do you guys, I've got a couple of things I'm jotting down here to make sure we talk about, and so I don't know if you guys can see the comments coming up. Okay, good. Do you guys suggest every dog be trained to wear a muzzle? I think I pretty much know that answer, but.
And no harm in it. I like it for almost like a relationship building tool as well. So if we can get owners to work with a muzzle in a positive way, then it can rebuild some bonds, if that's been impaired through for whatever reason. Then just working with a muzzle is a really simple and safe piece of equipment to maybe restore some of those bonds. But because we're using positive methods and we can go through the kind of step-by-steps in terms of the positive methods, but generally I think it can repair the bonds, and it's a great safety tool anyway. So that process of getting the owners into reward-based training and can be a nice little add-on and a benefit from it.
Yeah, I think a couple of additional benefits. People are saying, well, my dog will never need a muzzle, but you never know. Accidents can happen, dogs can get injured, emergency situations, if you have to evacuate a certain area, the dogs can be very scared in some of those very stressful times. So we can't always predict future behavior, based on what we're used to. So it can be very beneficial. The other thing too, as Jim was mentioning, is this building the relationship. I find that if I have a case where the dog has some issues, like handling issues, doesn't like to be touched or nails trimmed, and we want that safety aspect, when people start to learn how to condition well, so they creating a positive association with the muzzle, it's helping them learn to be better trainers or better teachers. And so they learn also, okay, this is how we slowly condition to a muzzle. And the dog doesn't have a negative association with that to begin with, but they do with maybe nail trims or something. So if you get good at conditioning a muzzle, you're going to start that kind of lay that foundational aspect to getting good at nail trims or ear cleaning or whatever other husbandry exercises you might need to incorporate. So it's good starting training exercise for a lot of clients, I think.
Yeah, and that muzzle, depending on how you train it, how you condition it, that muzzle can be a cue to the dog. Great things are getting ready to start happening.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So almost like a start button kind of activity.
Great point.
Yeah. So I wanted to, Mike, you just mentioned this, but Christy Darling says, owners would need to be appropriately trained on how to muzzle train as to not create other undesired behaviors in their dog. So do you guys have any tips for people watching or going to watch the replay as well? Now they're excited about muzzle training. Now they understand why it's important. Nobody plans an accident. So, I mean, I know that from here, muzzles are great in situations where there's an accident. You did not foresee this coming. Put the muzzle on. Do you have any tips for people or where they can go, like your websites, to learn about how to train your dog to accept the muzzle or to want to have the muzzle put on?
Sure. Jim, I'm sure you have some resources too that you like to recommend.
Sure. My first protocol was always a Muzzle Up Project, just because there was so much great content in there. And I think from a troubleshooting point of view, muzzle training can be a complex process. It's not something where we can take a muzzle and simply fit it to a dog and kind of hope it goes well. We have to go through a procedure to make sure that the association's in place and the perception of the muzzle is a positive one. And that is a relatively simple process, but it's always tailored for the individual, and that will vary from individual to individual. And that's not even factoring in that there could be some negative emotion around the muzzle from previous learning. So we may have to undo some of that if there is a really negative perception, mainly because in those situations of emergency, a muzzle has been fitted without any prior work been done, no preparatory work. So the association may be, I'm in a vet practice, and the only time I get a muzzle put on is when horrible things have been done to me, pain-related things have been done to me. So that could form a really negative emotion, and we would maybe have to undo that first of all. But if our dog that's seen it for the first time, we can go through a really gradual build-up process where, we're just acclimatizing and we're associating it positively. Sometimes the most trickiest part, and I tend to find this, not sure about you guys, but the clips in the class tends to be one of the hardest parts. Getting the dog to eat out of a muzzle can be a relatively straightforward process, but as soon as you gesture, as soon as you go to put those clasps on, then problems start. Yeah, and maybe that's a decent starting place from troubleshooting for the viewers, is to maybe get round that part of it. If you've got any tips there, Mike, that would be more than welcome.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Sometimes if you have to decide if the muzzle already has a negative association for the dog, or if somebody's just slapped one on, and that's why I always wait to tell my clients on how to acclimate a muzzle. I don't usually tell them to get one ahead of time in my cases, because the worst thing that can happen is somebody slaps a muzzle on a dog just before I come over. The association that occurs there. Sure, it'll keep me safer, but I'm always advocating for the dog to make sure that they're comfortable with what we're doing. So, but there's lots of resources. I mean, obviously the Muzzle Up Project, but we have the links to videos of many great trainers have already done. Chirag Patel's wonderful video. I like his way of going through it methodically, and especially in cases where there is a negative association already. I have a video on there it's sort of the lazy trainers version of muzzle acclimation, because it's just letting the dog kind of do the work. The muzzle becomes conditioned almost like a new Kong toy. Deb Jones, of course, has some great stuff. So there's lots of options on YouTube. People can easily search that up, and that's what I do. I send my clients links to those videos so they can see the process. And most do, a pretty decent job after watching the videos and going through and understanding it. So,
yeah, and Mike, before you go any further with people sending people to YouTube to look for links, I would definitely go to either one of your websites first so you know what links you're looking for. And I'll post both of your websites real quick. Mike's website, aggressivedog.com, and Jim's website, cwtdogbehavior.com. Notice the spelling of behavior. So, sorry, Mike, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No worries.
We're probably like
there's
looking on YouTube.
There's a couple. I've got it in my resources section on my website. One on how to acclimate, but also one on how to feed through a muzzle. So sometimes people get muzzles. This is a boomer's muzzle, right? If I can get that in the camera, right? It's a custom muzzle, which I've customized additionally to create a treat hole here. But sometimes that's hard to get a treat through. So you have different types of muzzles, like this one's a Jafco. It's got the treat hole there, but that can be hard to get regular. If we're using like treats, cut up treats, it's hard to get that. So I've got a video on there also shows how to use food tubes and different ways of feeding through something like this where it's hard to get treats through. Because a little side note too, some dogs, if I'm working with them and I'm trying to feed a treat through there, I've become, as I'm feeding treats, my hand sometimes, or the person's hand, if the dog's sensitive to that, I'm lingering around there a little longer than I would if there was no muzzle on, right? So if there's no muzzle on, we can do very fast reinforcement. With this, we sometimes have to figure out, and now our hand's lingering in there more, and that can create issues for the dog as well in the beginning stages. So food tubes can be very helpful to get over that.
Do you guys have Primula cheese over your way? The tube cheese?
We have Cheese Whiz in a can.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Dogs I have one client that uses that all the time for their dog, and she reinforces herself sometimes in between shots. She's spraying cheese in her mouth during our sessions.
Yeah, similar sort of concept. Yeah, and it's good to have that little tube you can just stick in the front of the grill and just squeeze away rather than putting the fingers in there that can still get nibbled. Yeah.
Something that works well here for me, and maybe other people are doing it, I don't know. I was just looking for, because I'll train any animal, but I train a lot of primates, larger cats. So, and I don't like my fingers getting sticky. That's a positive punisher for me. So I'm always looking for ways to deliver food without actually having to touch it. So I will take large syringes like this and cut the tip off of it and just load it with any type of meat substance, like with the bobcat. I'll load that full of elk, and it's nice because you can get just a lick, or if you get a bigger behavior, you can start pushing the syringe a little bit to get a little bit more. So you were talking about Cheese Whiz, and I'm thinking syringes loaded with meat.
Yeah. They're really actually great for duration reinforcement. So if I need a longer to pull out a little duration, especially in a husbandry exercise or something, or a vet visit. And so what happens in between treats, as you go to grab the next one, there's a little space in there where the dog's oh wait, now the vet's on my hind end or whatever. And by using food tubes or spray cheese or things like that, it keeps the dog's focus as we're as the husbandry exercise is being done.
Yeah. Quincy agrees. I don't know if you can hear it.
No one really likes cheese and hot dog hands, let's be honest. And your hands are covered in treats. For sure.
So when you guys were talking about your approach in counter conditioning the dog to wear a muzzle, we've trained our pig to wear a muzzle here.
Wow.
And something else for people who are watching this that work with an array of different animals. I'm working on harness training one of our larger parrots right now. It is, what month is this? February. Here in the States, I'm pre-planning. It's going to be very warm in a couple of months. So I'm starting my harness training with this particular bird right now. And a lot of times, when you're working with fearful animals, when you're working with prey, when you're working with the individual, I guess is the most important. A lot of times people will reach for that harness and start training. And a lot of times with me, like I showed a live stream yesterday, I didn't even start with the harness. I started preparing the bird for things to come close to your face, things getting ready to go over your head. I worked with another bird particularly, and I just took the leash and touched it to its back, bridge, reinforce. And I was reinforcing with attention. And this is a bird, so I don't even want to say it's a bird because I want people to put in whatever animal. This is an animal with a long bite history. A long bite history of animals in close proximity. So I taught this animal, what I don't want is your mouth opening a beak when hands are in close proximity. So what do I want you to do instead? And where I started with that particular bird was a head target. And that head target came in so handy yesterday because I was approaching different ways to see, okay, where can I begin with this leash? And immediately the leash comes into the environment, and the animal looks up at it, and its mouth opened slightly. So I'm like, that's what I don't want. So what do I want the bird to do instead? Very familiar with the head target. The head target means hold. Something's getting ready to happen, but whatever's getting ready to happen, I'm going to take it at your pace, and it's going to be well worth your while. So that's when I just head target, started with the leash, and just showed it to him. Bridge, and then I reached forward and reinforced with head scratch and some kissing. But it started with the leash on the back. Harness wasn't even involved yet. And you guys are talking about the snaps and the clasps. So, I mean, that could be even before getting the harness out, get the animal ready for a sound is getting ready to happen, bridge, reinforce.
Sure, great example. Yeah, Lara. So we can maybe use like a nose target, similar to dogs, just to get them used to that kind of gesture of putting their heads towards something that they might find threatening, you know, and then introduce the muzzle from there, or use the nose touch as Mike said earlier, like a start button, like a consent test, to just then sort of participate in the activity of the muzzle training. I think somebody in your comments had mentioned earlier about getting that nose to punch into the back of the muzzle, which is quite an important step, and sort of being reluctant to try and put the muzzle towards a face and trying to get a dog to voluntarily participate in coming into the muzzle is quite an important troubleshooting step. It's similar to what you were talking about there. We can maybe train some of those behaviours independent of the muzzle even being there, just as preparatory work. I've used a Costa coffee cup just to get the sensation of maybe popping their nose into something that's not then the muzzle, which is good if there is negative emotions around the muzzle in the first place, is we're kind of using something similar but not quite the visual of the muzzle.
Yeah, I've been leaning towards using chin rest behaviors, and I know Deb uses that as well. So chin rest, the nice thing about chin rest is that I find you can get longer duration with that versus a nose touch, because it's more comfortable rather than the dog's kind of having to put their nose against something. So start with the chin rest behavior, and then you obviously gradually build in chin rest into the muzzle. So yeah, there's so many different ways you can get creative with it.
Yeah.
There is indeed.
And for those that may be watching and don't understand what chin rest, Mike, do you want to?
Yeah, so chin rest, they use that a lot in it's useful for like husbandry, again, vet visits, doing things like that. Laura Monaco Torelli also does a really great job of showing chin rest behaviors with her dog. But it's basically you're getting the dog to rest their chin, and it can be generally you can use your hands as the target, but you can have I've seen it done where the dog's resting their chin on a certain object or something. But what they're doing is just basically placing their chin there, and that's where they're stationing. Now, and it can also be, as Jim was mentioned, used like sort of a consent test. If the dog's ready, they'll put their chin, but we always give them that option to say, I need a break, and fine, you're communicating to me that you need a break. So we just let the dog kind of, or animal, let us know that's part of their conversation. And
so powerful though, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah.
So powerful, that consent, being able to turn off that pressure voluntarily. It's such an elegant way of going about it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so kind of like a head target, but it's a chin rest. So if you don't want If you're not comfortable with what's getting ready to happen, you're not going to put your head into the target position. And that's communication to me. Okay. What's making this animal not comfortable in this situation? When hearing you talk about the chin rest and the consent yesterday with working with this animal, he was putting his head into the target, but I wasn't really sure he was comfortable. So I asked another behavior, which was he knows to walk to wherever I point. So I pointed my hand on the perch, and he walked down, bridge reinforced. I pointed my hand back because I could get a better read on behavior when I watch him walking side by side. I mean, not side by side, but across in front of me.
Yeah, I love that, because another benefit of that is you're reducing the chance of extinction or frustration happening there, because you're giving the animal another option that can provide reinforcement, right? Rather than just sticking on this one behavior they're getting uncomfortable with and they're not always getting reinforced for it. And so if you give them another option, you kind of highly reduce that risk for extinction bursts and frustration come into play. So yeah, I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. And accidentally positively punishing the very behavior we're trying to train. Because I found myself, I've done that before, where I thought I had an accurate read on behavior, and I ended up pushing the animal past its comfort level. No problem. I can back up and train again. But my problem was the animal just had that experience. You know, and even if it's paired just that one time, and I could see, like, if I bring out the muzzle again, watch the behavior on the animal. Is this animal showing signs of being as comfortable as he was 5 minutes ago or yesterday? So I try not to put myself in a position where I have to counter condition anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe how it builds originally with muzzles as well. It goes beyond the point of the animal's tolerance or coping with that particular piece of equipment. So it just builds aversion. The next time they see it, you've got that negative emotion around the muzzle. So that's why the initial phases are so important, to get that really positive association to the muzzle.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here reading through some comments because I was backtracking. Do you guys care about discussing some comments that people are making?
Sure, yeah.
Please do. Yeah, sure.
So here's one. I'm scrolling back. Mary Florence says it would be great if vet offices offered muzzle training as a service for dogs who could use it. Or it would also be great if vets had, and they do, some of them really do, who are really into behavior and wanting people not to have to counter condition, because they're going to be the ones in this dog's face the next time it comes in. For vets to have a list of references for qualified, certified trainers that they can refer the training to.
Yeah, sure. The principle's great. And I think sometimes the time constraints on a vet can sometimes make that a little bit awkward for them, and particularly if you're going to be training muzzle conditioning in a vet practice, maybe isn't the best location to be starting that off. Maybe in somewhere where the animal's more familiar and calmer, like a home, like a living room type thing, and sort of build it up from there. But I completely agree, referring to kind of qualified behaviours to work them through on that would definitely be my preference from a vet for sure.
Yeah. I think it's, unfortunately, they have so much to concentrate on in that environment, and also in the learning. So when I was lecturing at North Carolina State University to the veterinary students there, they were just, when I was talking about muzzles, it was like everywhere was, head was about to explode, because they just don't consider that. They're using quick, the nylon slip muzzles. And there's no conditioning at all. What would be great, though, is if they included muzzle conditioning into some of the puppy culture. So when people are getting puppies, and the breeders can start off that conversation. We've got great conversations going on about puppy socialization right now and getting those things done. So it'd be great to also include muzzling in that conversation.
Yes. Julie says, hang the muzzle on a low kitchen cabinet so it's seen a lot to get them used to seeing it a lot. And something I thought of when reading that comment is, you could, if, the dog needs a lot of counter conditioning to a muzzle, You could even train the dog to put its own muzzle, its nose into the muzzle. Your hands aren't even a part of it yet.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the boxes come where you can turn the muzzle sort of upside down in the box, and that's a good way just to turn it into almost like a food dispensing, piece of equipment. And the dog's voluntarily going in there and getting food and forming those positive emotions, but on a sort of voluntary basis. Some of them do, some of them don't. I think the basketball ones you can turn sort of on their back, and then you're not really in that process. You're allowing the dog to engage with it voluntarily and independently.
Yeah, I had a case, this American Bulldog, years ago, that even the sight of a muzzle. So if the owner took anything out that looked like a muzzle, the dog would charge across and bite very severely.
Wow.
So fortunately, the Baskervilles had just come out at that time. Knowing now what I know now, I would have started with something like a chin rest and not even presented the muzzle. But what we did was just that. We said, okay, we're going to use this like it's a brand new Kong toy. We're going to stuff some peanut butter in there. We're going to set it out, and we're going to leave it like it's a new toy, and the dog can lick and just got to put their nose in there to get the peanut butter out. So we slowly conditioned for probably a couple months of doing that before we even started to go near the dog's face, because the dog was a severe bite risk, but there's nothing we could do to get a muzzle on the dog at that time. So, but it went well. She did a wonderful job, that client.
Great. Funny, I'm scrolling through. And somebody mentioned about peanut butter at the same time. With the dog at our shoulder, I started with the muzzle sitting in a bowl with peanut butter in the bottom, shoved in. He shoved his face in so quickly, and it's always paired with the positive. So then your muzzle's on its way to becoming a conditioned reinforcer, or is becoming a conditioned reinforcer, where they'll soon start seeing the muzzle, and instead of walking away, eagerly walking towards it.
That's what we want, for sure. I had a similar case with a border collie that was so avoidant on the muzzle that it was almost impossible to try and fit it, because as soon as you say, Mike, anything that came out that resembled the muzzle, straight away you get avoidance, and backing away. Now, this dog didn't have much aggression in her, but very much avoidant, and would just back away on sight of the muzzle, which makes it really difficult from close handling point of view. So for those dogs, we probably have to work more on their perception of just the muzzle independent from a handler, just to sort of change that association. And peanut butter has many applications in dog training.
There's a conversation going on while we're conversing. Somebody mentioned, this is kind of backtracking, I'd like to hear some of your approaches to getting dogs used to that sound of a snap in close proximity. Somebody mentioned, can you use a clicker on the back of the neck to start getting them accepting of this sound? Deb says, I'm very careful with this. Some dogs find it quite aversive, particularly a regular box clicker.
Yeah, that snap of the clicker can sometimes, spook a dog, and if they're not, so it would all be about the context and individual case, I would say, on that one. If a dog's familiar with a clicker and has a positive association to it, then possibly, but certainly not fully hearing it for the first time or anything that could really spook a dog.
Yeah, I'm always careful with just like any other provocative stimulus, the distance and the intensity of the stimulus. So if I'm going to start conditioning something, I will have the dog way across the other side of the room, and some dogs you have to even use something to muffle the sound, so you put inside a towel and you make that sound, and then of course you pair it with food or whatever you're using, and then you gradually increase the intensity of it. So you might remove the towel, it's still at a distance, and then you start reducing the distance over time. So just like anything else we would condition, we got to be careful. And sometimes we just change the equipment. Sometimes we just start with a different type of muzzle or a different. You get some of the older Baskervilles with the buckle straps versus having to hear that sound. So sometimes it's easier. The quicker fix is just to switch the equipment.
Yeah, for sure. I think it sometimes can be the gesture as well. If the dog has, particularly negative experiences with the muzzle, then sometimes those human hands coming around to clasp it on is sometimes they're anticipating that happening, and that's where you maybe see some difficulty trying to get it. The final stages of getting it on to acclimatise them.
Well, one little trick too that I use is that if there's a buckle clasp on any whatever equipment, whether it's a harness, a collar, or a muzzle that we're trying to put on, I start just on this. So I start like really on that, so it's wide open, and I teach the dog to, put this on this way rather than me reaching around. That way, when I do need to tighten it, it's already pre-laced. So in other words, I just have to do this. So it's a lot easier for the dog in the sense that I don't have to reach around with two hands and fiddle around with it. And putting these old Baskervilles on, it's like putting on a tuxedo. It takes so many steps to it. So if it's already pre-laced, you can just simply tighten it that way.
Great tip. Yeah. Love that, Mike. Yeah, love that.
I love that. I'm currently harness training 2 lemurs that we have here, and I was trying to figure out how to approach. So I did start with the actual harness, touching the animal, but then where I found myself, I'm like, that I had to stop is the animal puts his head through the puts the head through the harness. Then I need to reach behind because I've been doing all this work with one hand. With one hand and the reinforcement delivery from the left hand. So when it came time that the lemurs were putting their head through the harness, then I went to grab and reach behind them. And so I found I had to do it with one hand, but then I'm like, how am I going to get to this clasp? Because I need to now take both hands and go behind the animal. So there was some extra work for me to do there. With saying that, can you give the viewers any tips on what behaviors to watch for when training this that your dog may not be comfortable with your approaches, just to prevent having to counter condition?
Sure. Avoidance would probably be the biggest marker for me. So any distance increasing behavior that you see is probably an indication that the dog's feeling threatened, under those conditions. So that might mean the muzzle itself or the gestures that we just spoke about. And I think it's quite hard for some dogs to have, as we were saying, have those 2 hands come around, and that can be quite intimidating. And if you're seeing any avoidance, backing away, that type of thing, any rigid body language, then it may indicate that there's aversion building there.
Yeah. Similarly, a tip I give my clients is don't move. Let the dog move. Because that's going to allow them. You're giving them that part of the conversation. You want to move towards it, great. I'll reinforce you with that. You want to move away from it, great. I'm going to let you do that. And the reinforcement happens when you approach, and so you let the dog kind of dictate the conversation. And I find that really helpful. Clients just stop moving so much, because they can start to put all this movement and trying to get things on or rush things really can make it go in.
Lots going on, isn't there? Sometimes lots going on with it. Yeah. And I think with some owners, they're so keen to try and help their dog and maybe impress in the session that they're kind of pushing the dog over threshold, essentially. They're just rushing it a little bit.
Yeah. Daphne also says, yes, let them control their space. Perfect. So just a key for people who might start trying to work with this, let your dog back away. That's a cue that it may not be comfortable. For a dog, say that it might be a little harder to read behaviors, what are some more subtle signs? Say, like the dog isn't backing away. But I know, Jim, you mentioned rigid. What are some other cues people can look for from their dog that it might be nervous, might not be comfortable, but yet it's not backing away from you?
Sure. So you might see whale eye, that sort of side eye, a kind of really anxious kind of look at you. You might be seeing a lot of lip licking, the more subtle signs that are not about creating distance, but are communicating that, the animal's under stress. And those are probably good markers. And maybe if the dog is rigid in position with a sort of frozen tail, then maybe a good indicator that they're not coping particularly well, the intensity is too high. Sometimes the way they're taking the treats out the bottom of the muzzle can be a good indicator. If they normally take them nice and calmly and then they're all of a sudden very grabby, that's a very good indicator that they're under stress, I would say. Should I agree with that?
Yeah, you covered pretty well, didn't you?
There's an animal here. Yeah, another animal. Rachel Saunders says maybe the dog is yawning. That could be one.
Yeah, totally.
There's an animal here particularly. A lot of our training here in the beginning stages is all off contact. off contact until you learn that animal's individual behaviors and when it does these particular behaviors. There's one here in particular that, and I will ask the volunteers, what is that animal doing right now? And if they say nothing, I'll say it's doing something because it's getting ready to attack you. There's cage bars here, but the behavior that I want to say that I think is relative across a lot of species is this animal will stiffen up, not move, and nothing moves but his eyes. That's clear communication. You're getting ready to be bitten.
Yeah. Yeah. My colleague, Trish McMillan, and I always say that in our seminars, we love dogs who breathe. Because when they stop breathing, it's usually a bad thing.
So I know, we're coming up on the hour. Before I show your websites again, what are some other things that people can train before they start the muzzle training to get the animal used to this kind of interaction communication?
Sure. I think just general reward-based training, like marker training, incorporating that into some form of training prior to muzzle would be good communication. It would establish relationship, and criteria for earning reinforcement. So probably having some form of reward marker, whether it is a clicker or the word yes or whatever you choose to use, having that prepared and in play, I would say would be quite important for going through the process.
Yeah, I think learning just how to get a good conditioned emotional response, and explaining that. So clients obviously don't know what that means. Most of them don't know what that means at first. So I just explain, what does your dog do when you take out the leash if it likes walks? What does your dog do when it hears you go to the treat cabinet and crinkle that treat bag? And they answer, oh, well, the dog comes running. They love it. And so I said, that's what you want to do with the muzzle.
Yes.
You want that conditioned. And if you can get good at that in other aspects, then you're going to get good at it with pretty much all the issues that we're having in most of these cases. So.
Yeah. And I'll tell people a lot of times, if you're not familiar with the individual animal, I'll do like a target stick training and introduce that. And so many people are like, oh, the target stick's like a magic wand. It's not a magic wand. It's science. It's contingency. It's conditioning. That magic wand usually comes out no other time, but when it's time for a nose target. If I don't understand an animal, if I think I understand an animal, and I want to make sure I really understand an animal, because I work with a lot of animals that can do some serious bodily injury really fast. I'm doing off contact training in the beginning, and I'll teach that nose target, and I'll teach that nose target here. I'll teach it up here. I'll teach it down here. I'll teach it to turn your head to the side. And a lot of what I'm looking for is what other behaviors are happening. How is your body moving in different ways when you're touching that nose target? Because those are going to give signs to me that rigidity is coming in again. Okay. I am nowhere near touching this animal yet. So yeah, great information, you guys. I know what I'm doing the rest of the day. And I'm going to go to your websites, both of your websites. With Jim's, I've been on yours many times, and look for your information. So to find Michael Shikashio, more information about him and the great work he's doing, aggressivedog.com. To find Jim and the amazing work he's doing, CWTdogbehavior.com. Are you both on social media?
Sure.
Heavily.
Okay.
Too much. Too much.
We can find you both on Facebook, Instagram.
Both.
Any additional?
Little bit of YouTube for me. I haven't updated it in a while, but I have some videos there too. That's under Aggressive Dog, or at Aggressive Dog on YouTube, and similarly Facebook and Instagram. Michael Shikashio on Instagram.
Okay. And we also have the muzzleupproject.com.
Yep.
You can also follow Muzzle Up Project on Instagram. And you both have a specialty in working with dogs labeled as aggressive, correct?
Yeah. Sure. But it's all Mike, that's all you work with, isn't it? Aggression cases.
That's all I'd see. Yeah.
Okay.
It's brave. Credit to you.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to show a couple slides before we end. For those of you that follow the work that I do, we have an upcoming animal behavior and training workshop. This is focusing on all species. We have several zookeepers coming that'll be in Chicago. And this is part of Dr. Jason Crean's course every year on zoo genetics and biology. You can also, coming up in a couple weeks, I'll be speaking at the Featherfest Connecticut Parrot Expo. And then we have our zoo workshop coming up in June. We just announced it. It's half sold out, so if you want your spot, get it quickly. Like I said, the Animal Behavior Center has just celebrated its 7th anniversary on Friday. Sam I Can Foundation is our nonprofit that we started as a memorial to an animal that we lost. Sam I Can Foundation is really helping people understand and empower those animals. And we just recently raised $2,500 in one day for the amazing Nancy Forrester of Nancy Forrester's Secret Garden in Key West. So I want to get a shout out to everybody that helped us make this happen. Jim, Mike, thank you so much. This has been an amazing episode, and your cat thinks so too.
That's fine.
I still have this on, Lara. Appreciate it.
I would love to have you both come on again in the future. Feel free to, once the live stream is over, there was a lot of questions, comments that I couldn't get to. You both feel free to go in and answer them. I'm going to make sure your websites are up for everybody to see.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Great.
Lara.
You're very welcome. Thank you both. Take care, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.